Luna Oi made a terrible video on democratic centralism. We can't do a Luna Oi video. We can't.
Hi everybody, I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna Oi.
I can't. God damn it.
Dialectical materialism is a philosophy first formalized by Marx, Engels, and then Lenin, which builds upon various earlier philosophies. One of the
Okay, right off the bat, do not bring Lenin into this. What the? What? Why would you? Why would you not just say Marx and Engels? What? Okay.
But to try to put it simply, whenever this affects that, that also affects this.
Okay, so what she's describing right now isn't dialectical materialism. It's the laws of thermodynamics, actually. Any force acted upon will be acted upon itself by the... So this is a different thing, you know. We're actually describing causality. Well, it is called scientific socialism. Yeah, Marx came up with like, you know, Newton's laws of thermodynamics. It's just due to historical revisionism that they're attributed to Isaac Newton.
I change you, you also change me, and these mutual impacts are what drive all development of everything in our universe.
Luna's a weirdo authoritarian, but in what world is she a fascist? Oh, literally, like, distinctly and consistently. Her main priority is being like a Vietnamese nationalist, but in doing so, she spouted a lot of reactionary shit. Basically, it's like the ML version of fascism, where, like, you coat everything with red paint, but all of it kind of comes back down to, like, defend the state at all costs, you live for the state, like hyper-nationalism, like a kind of, like, chauvinist endorsement of perpetual global conflict for the sake of, like, the people. Weird, like, ethno-nationalist tendencies. Yeah, red fascism, you know, whatever. Maybe, like, nationalist would be the better way of putting it, but I don't think that's really fair, because there are, like, Kurdish nationalists who are cool. You know, when I say nationalist in reference to, like, Luna Oi, I'm using it, like, I'm saying it, like, in a mean way. Like, nationalist, open quotes, pejorative, close quotes. Why do these people always come back to dialectical materialism? Do they have no other arguments? Well, she hasn't made an argument yet. The reason why it always comes back to this bad definition for dialectical materialism is because this is also a fascist characteristic. They strive to make their ideology a substitute for empiricism. Does that make any sense? Like, basically, it's not sufficient to have, like, a worldview and a perspective, like a frame of reference. Your definition needs to be, it needs to be, like, a substitute for reality itself, which is, of course, what fascist groups often do. It can't just be an ideology. It has to be something more fundamental. It has to be a law. Which is why you have MLs with the obsession with scientific socialism, you know, which does have a definition that isn't completely retarded, but it also has lots of definitions that are totally retarded.
Democracy is usually understood as a form of organization and state institution in which the power of the people is respected.
I don't like the language that she's using, because I know that for, like, Tankies, the definition of democracy is when, like, you have an authoritarian leader who nobody can displace, and also all your citizens grow up worshiping them and agree with them. You know what I mean? Like, democracy to a Tankie is like, you have a god emperor who lives in a palace, but all the people really like him because they grew up learning about how he single-handedly beat back Westerners, like, 50 years ago. So, you know, so it's a democracy. That's like Chinese democracy right there. It's great. You know, you can vote for our candidates, but only from one party, and the party chooses the candidates that you can vote for. Yeah.
And the will of the people is respected by social systems and institutions. Though it might shock you to hear me say this, but democracy is not always a good thing. What I mean by
really? Is that true?
And we are still on the path of defining and discovering democratic values around the world. As for
listen to the way this is described. Finding and discovering democratic values. You don't discover democratic values. It's a philosophical and political principle. You create them. They're not natural laws to be discovered. The reason she uses terms like discovery is because this pulls in with the scientific socialism thing. It's the idea that her political philosophy isn't actually philosophy. It's natural law that's being observed and recorded the same way that you would discover, like, a new species of insect. It's a very creepy and very cult-like way. Yeah, no, it's just a dogmatic rhetorical device, I think.
Just as democracy...
If you want an understanding of why it's problematic, think of how often fascists will attempt to define their beliefs as part of a natural law. They do it literally all the time. All of their political positions aren't just, ideas they have. They're natural laws about the nature of the world and humanity. They're constantly reasserting that. Any effort to kind of like essentialize and make empirical, philosophical, or political beliefs, in my opinion, is deeply suspect.
And democracy in and of itself is not inherently a good or bad thing, and neither is centralism. It all depends on the format.
Because there's scientific law, because these aren't ideologies. They're natural laws that we discover and implement for the glory of the Vietnamese people and Ho Chi Minh thought.
Rather than seeing democracy.
Do you think she's stupid or intentionally doing newspeak stuff? No, she's not stupid at all. This is 100% intentional. She's essentially just regurgitating the propaganda of her regime. Do you guys remember when we went over that, like, the textbook stuff from Vietnam, and it was full of, like, insane propaganda bullshit that literally, like, could have read out of any Nazi textbook? Like, our glorious leader saved us, and, like, Marxism is actually where Marx wrote down that you should always listen to your leaders, like trying to repurpose it as some kind of, like, Confucianist bullshit, It was pretty creepy, yeah. I can't tell you how happy I am that over here in the West, the majority of prominent historical philosophers were, if not anti-authoritarian, at the very least, like, more individualist than some of the more prominent Eastern philosophers or whatever. Thank God I didn't grow up under Confucianism.
We see democracy and centralism as having a dialectical relationship with each other, meaning that they are defined in large part by their relationship with one another. You just can't have...
Why doesn't she say the actual definition of a dialectic, which is when competing ideas or material forces or interests in conflict, you identify and resolve the internal contradictions with them? Like, what? That's the... Okay. What is your perspective on Ho Chi Minh thought with democratic centralist characteristics? How do you feel? How do you feel? Yeah? Say it again. Well said, Pigeon.
Access only to illusionary democratic systems and elections, but they don't really have a voice, which has been proven in countless studies. And
that's not true at all. There are some problems with the studies that you guys have probably seen on like the US being an oligarchy. It's more complicated than people like Luna Oi want you to make it seem to be. Also, I really don't know if somebody who's a Vietnamese nationalist who defends China constantly wants to start, like, throwing stones in this very glass house that she lives in. Here, this study got obliterated. Yeah, the oligarchy study was total bullshit. Here's what you guys have to understand, okay? So this is like, you have to go one level higher, okay? Basically, like, so the cucks are like, we live in a democracy, and then you, the enlightened leftist, are like, no. Didn't you see that study that showed that rich people only vote on stuff in line with what the rich people want? All the senators and stuff, they just vote for stuff rich people want. Haha, smiley face, look at the study. And then it turns out the study's wrong, and it's like, oh, so we do live in democracy? The answer is called, it's the only good thing Chomsky ever did. Manufacturing consent, okay? That's it. This is, like, Marx wrote about this, okay? The ideology of the ruling class is necessarily the ruling ideology. You don't need to, like, fake the votes or have politicians directly act against the interests of the people. Just have ultra-wealthy people control every aspect of your media and public culture, and then have them disseminate values which are positive toward yourself, and therefore people will, of their own autonomy, vote in your interest, right? Like, think of how much here in America, American individualism and American exceptionalism get wrapped up in this, like, I don't need no health care attitude. Do you think that's an accident? Do you think that's, like, a mistake? Do you think it's a coincidence that people, after having consumed decades and decades of media produced by wealthy people, happen to have some kind of twisted definition of autonomy that involves, like, them being cucked by the government and not being given basic provisions that other people in countries less wealthy than our own enjoy? Yeah, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's manufacturing consent.
You can also have a social group with very little centralism and a lot of democracy, though these kinds of groups tend to be very short-lived, since members will tend...
You might notice that this video is directly saying that we need a balance between freedom and harmony is being substituted for authoritarianism. Isn't that setting off, like, alarm bells in your head? She's literally saying, in order to, so first of all, this is like baby's first politics, where it's like, we need a little bit of socialism and a little bit of capitalism, and that way we get equality, you know? Yeah, she's essentially saying, like, we need to balance the people's freedom with authoritarianism, which I am also using words like harmony and unity, you know, in tandem with. Like, why is she using the same term to describe authoritarian governments and harmony? Is it harmonious to have an authoritarian government? You know, like, why? I don't think those are I think that you can generate harmony within a society, like, sort of naturally. When people are free, they'll gravitate towards their self-interest, and if people belong to the same basic demographic classes, their self-interest will align, right? Like, if you live in a proletarian state or a dictatorship of the proletariat, you could have a free society in which people gravitate towards proletarian-oriented politics, not because they're being guided there by some like central authoritarian government, but rather because it aligns with their material interests. Funnily enough, Lunaoy's video feels kind of like a rejection of Marxian materialist analysis here.
Most political movements which have fallen apart throughout history have fallen apart due to a lack of sense of unity in vision and strategy.
I wonder why the Marxist-Leninist is impressing this value upon us. The ML, after they just got done shooting in the back of the head all the anarchists after the Russian Revolution ended. If only we, if only we had unity. If only they had believed in submitting to the unifying force of our Vanguard Party. You might notice also that even if you're super charitable, and all she's actually saying is like, we need a democracy, but people also need to get along, then this entire video becomes incredibly vapid. There's also nothing ML about this at all. Nothing about this is Marxist, or even like, nothing about this is even leftist. This is just like Sesame Street logic right here. That's if you're being charitable. In reality, I think this video is loaded with like authoritarian apologia. But if you're being super charitable and you're just like, oh yeah, she's just saying that you need to balance total freedom with also people should get along, smiley face, then like this video is so vapid and so politically void that there wasn't even a reason to make it, you know? The authoritarian dog whistling is the purpose of this video.
In other words, democracy and centralism have a dialectical relationship. They mutually impact one another. Better democracy.
No, you would say the contradictions between them are resolved. I can't, man, dude, fuck. I can't believe people say I don't read theory.
The political economy of Vietnam was way more centralized since we had a planned economy under the subsidizing system. I have a video on that. Link is in the description.
This is when Vietnam went capitalist, right? And therefore got a lot wealthier because capitalism is better than state capitalism. Listen, okay, this is of the competing ideologies in which we live today, you know, there is one ideology against which I will defend laissez-faire capitalism, and that is state capitalism.
And many other centralized controls are generally weaker or don't exist in liberal free market capitalist.
What is this? What am I even doing? What is this? Okay, Vietnam went capitalist. There's probably not much of a point in continuing from there. Well, that might be a tanky dumb fuck, but how's there saying there's a dialectical relationship between democracy and centralism wrong? That's the thing. It's not wrong, but she's misusing dialectical materialism. She describes dialectical materialism like a fucking thermodynamic process. Like, things affect other things. No shit, everything affects everything else, obviously. Like, yeah, of course. She's like, many foolish Westerners believe that two things are unrelated, but I, wise Eastern political philosopher, am here to remind you that actually these two things are related. Wow, fucking thank you. Great. Very wise. It's not an adherence to dialectical, like, principles, you know, that the resolution of the agitation between the two competing forces, the internal contradictions that you try to find, the synthesis, you know?